is Charmaine, and I'm the dietitian that helps people reverse type 2 diabetes with plant-based eating. And I have Galia here, who is our program coach. You can say hi to everyone, Galia.
Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to be back. It's been a while, but we're back, and this is going to be a really cool episode, hopefully, for you guys. I mean, we hope.
Yes. I'm definitely super excited because, like Galia said, it's been a while. There's a lot of different changes, exciting changes within the reversing diabetes program. So we were working on that, but now we really wanted to bring this podcast to you guys because we really want to talk about more of the science behind reversing diabetes. And just a lot of people, especially on TikTok, they're kind of skeptical, like what, like a plant-based diet? But that's why we're here. We really want to bring more of the science on the table that's not often talked about. It's definitely really exciting. So we can get into it. So we're going to make this a series where, hopefully you guys like it. If not, maybe we won't make it into a series. But if you guys like it, we'll make it into a series where we talk about different science research about a plant-based diet and its effect on type 2 diabetes. So Galia, would you like to kind of introduce us to the article?
Yes, I'm just gonna pull it up. Okay, so I'm super excited to kind of run through this article with you. My background is in research science, so I personally love looking at stuff like this. And, like Charmaine said, there are a lot of, people who engage with us on social media that are often skeptical about the way that a plant-based diet can help you to reverse diabetes. And I'm not going to criticize anyone for being skeptical about that because I understand where it comes from, right? And I think when you've tried so many things and you haven't gotten that result that you've been promised, naturally you're going to be, skeptical about things. You're not going to be as trusting. And so that's kind of why we wanted to share this specific article with you guys. So I'm just going to read through the abstract, if that's okay, which is just going to kind of look through the general topic of the article, what it's investigating. So this is the abstract. Diet interventions have suggested an association between plant-based diets and improvements in psychological well-being, quality of life, and glycated hemoglobin, otherwise known as HbA1c, control in populations with diabetes. The aims of this review are to systematically analyze the available literature on plant-based diet interventions targeting diabetes in adults and to clearly define the benefits on well-being of such interventions. This is a systematic review of controlled trials. Plant-based diets were associated with significant improvement in emotional well-being, physical well-being, depression, quality of life, general health, HbA1c levels, weight, total cholesterol, and low-density lipoprotein cholesterol, compared with several diabetic associations, official guidelines, and other comparator diets. Plant-based diets can significantly improve psychological health, quality of life, HbA1c levels, and weight, and therefore the management of diabetes. So that's the run through. That's kind of what this article is looking at. Part of why we chose to, go through this article with you guys is because it looks at so many clinical markers, right? So everything that was listed in that abstract, from HbA1c, quality of life, depression, cholesterol levels, and those are all real concerns that people have, that when you're living with diabetes, when you're trying to manage. So we picked this one just because it looks at randomized controlled trials. So those are like the golden standard of trials in the research community. And it's because they basically look at one factor, one thing that is changed in a population. So you'll have the control group and then another group where only one factor is changed. And that's kind of what is being assessed. So in these studies that we're looking at, the thing that is being changed is the diet. All other indicators are being kept the same. All other conditions are kept the same. And that really allows you to kind of investigate the impact of that one change.
Yeah, no, I think it's really cool because, well, we can address the physical sides. What I like about this study too, we can address the physical side and also the emotional, the maintenance of this lifestyle, which I think it's really cool that it had a whole analysis of a wholesome analysis of everything that has to do with type 2 diabetes. And I think what's great, out of this is that not only the HbA1c was being able to be lowered in most of the studies. I think 8 out of 9 of those studies, the intervention group, which is the plant-based group, was able to significantly have a significant decrease compared to the control group, which I think is amazing. And so I think not only the physical side where their blood sugar was getting better, they were also able to, discontinue the medication, and a lot of people lost weight as well, and they were able to decrease the insulin doses. So I think those were definitely really exciting parts of the physical outcome, but also with the emotional outcome, or just more like quality of life outcome, it was also highlighted as well. I don't know if you want to touch on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you said, I think it's really interesting because those two different areas are being addressed. So the physical and that emotional or mental impact of these changes. And a lot of the time that emotional, mental health kind of component gets overlooked. And for anybody living with a chronic condition, that is a huge, that's something that's huge. And your emotional, mental health is going to actually also really dictate your ability to adhere to a lifestyle change. And that's something that was, reinforced in these studies. So what the review does is it kind of searches through a database. It looks for certain buzzwords like plant-based and HbA1c, and it pulls all the studies that are available online in certain databases that include those buzzwords. Then they get filtered out for, other things that are being looked at. So in this review, there are 11 studies that are being looked at, and they look at, hundreds of people. What's interesting is that quality of life is only reported to improve in the intervention group. So that is the group that is on a plant-based diet, not the conventional diabetes diet. People's depression levels are reported to be lower when they switch to a plant-based diet in all of these, 11 studies that the review is looking at. So that's something that's super, super interesting. And if you are listening to this, if you are someone who is living with diabetes or pre-diabetes, you know that those concerns on quality of life, your physical limitations, the emotional limitations that you might experience, those are huge, and they will really dictate your ability to kind of function a lot of the time on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's something that's really interesting to take a look at. And Charmaine, I don't know if you want to add anything onto that.
Yeah, no, I think that's what got my attention from this study as well. I know we always talk about, a plant-based diet can help you reverse insulin resistance. It can help you increase your insulin sensitivity, decrease your HbA1c, your blood sugar, all the good physical stuff. But I think it's interesting that it highlights the quality of life, right? Because I think at the end of the day, that's what we're after. We're decreasing A1C, we're decreasing fasting blood sugar, we're improving our physical health so that we have a better quality of life, right? Because I think a lot of times people are so stuck on, okay, I got to get my blood sugar down, but they go extreme ways to do so, but they don't really have an improvement in quality of life, which is interesting because you mentioned that in the control, they don't really see that. But in the control, that means people that weren't necessarily on the plant-based diet. But with the plant-based diet groups, right, they see they see a significant increase in the quality of life. So I think that says a lot, because at the end of the day, I want people to also realize we're all doing this not just for the sake of the blood sugar, right? We're all doing this so that you can live a better life. And so I think that's a really, really great thing that this study highlights, which I don't see a lot of study highlighting. Oh, actually, all of these studies are highlighting that. But I think when it comes to food or like a meta-analysis, this is definitely something that is often overlooked. And I'm really grateful that this study highlighted that. And it just also resonates with me in how we help people, me and Galia, we always have a big emphasis on your mindset, on your emotional health, because it goes hand in hand. It goes hand in hand with your physical health. It's kind of like an airplane, right? Like the airplane needs two of the wings, right? right? If one wing is down, like it really can't fly, right? So if your physical health is down, your mental health won't be that great. But if your mental health isn't that great, your physical health won't be that great either. So it's really all interconnected, and I think it's really cool. My question to you, Gali, is why do you think that is? Like, why do you think that their quality of life is way better compared to the control group? What do you think?
Yeah, so I love this question, and I was literally thinking about this in my mind as you were
Right?
talking. But I actually think there are so many levels and ways that you can approach that kind of a question. And I think to start with, I think a plant-based diet is very, very flexible, right? So the conventional diabetes diet that a lot of people with type 2 get put onto is restrictive in nature. It requires you to have small portions, to count calories, to cut out carbs, which our body naturally kind of craves, right? So I think in that sense, just feeling restricted, feeling limited in your choices, I think that really does affect a person. I know that it's personally affected me. I know from conversations I've had with people who come through the program that that's something that they really have experienced in the past. And so I think that question can be answered on that level, but on a deeper level as well. If you have a diet that, if we're talking about diets that are, highly processed or high in fat, high in refined sugar, in comparison to a plant-based diet, I think there are, and, don't quote me on this, I can pull something up and, and confirm, but I have seen studies in the past that do reference people who are more plant-based as having better mental health and mood, right? And I think have so many, for example, if your diet is heavily based on foods that consist of a lot of refined sugars, your insulin is constantly spiking, your blood sugar is spiking, it's going to be like a roller coaster, and that's going to affect your energy, which can a lot of the time translate into your mood. At the same time, a lot of the molecules that are required to synthesize neurotransmitters, so literally what is responsible for our experience, our emotional experience, our mood, right? That comes from food. Those molecules come from food. And if your diet is one that does not consist of whole foods, of foods that are rich in vitamins, in minerals, in the essential kind of nutrients, in your macromolecules and carbs, lipids, proteins, that ability to synthesize those neurotransmitters and other, molecules, compounds in your body, it's going to be affected. And so I think that definitely plays into things as well. And I'm sure there are studies out there that look into that in more detail. And if it's something that you're interested in, you can let us know and we can look at one of those studies. But those are the things that come to mind. Is there something, that you think about when looking into why that is the case, that quality of life seems to be improved in people who are plant-based?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can speak from, working with different people on a plant-based diet, to help them with diabetes. I think you highlighted a lot of, what study shows or what the science shows, and I think those are really cool too. And I think, on a individual, like interpersonal basis, when I talk to people, a lot of times just the fact that they don't have to restrict, kind of like what you said, it just I can see it from their face. Like they're just like, what? Like, I don't have to restrict. And it's funny because in the beginning of the week, I had a conversation with a client who's almost done with the reversing diabetes program. And she was like, yeah, it just feels so comfortable. And it feels weird that I'm comfortable because everything is going so great, but I'm not like trying really hard. I'm just comfortable. It's just easy. And it's funny because I mean, in the beginning, like she had to like adapt to different things, but now she just feels like this feeling of everything is going great and I'm getting results. Like I don't have to deprive myself. Like that feels so weird. But it's a good thing, right? Because I think that's a big part is where people don't have to, restrict. When people hear that they don't have to count calories, they don't have to count carbs on this reversing diabetes method, they're like, what? Like that's great. And I think the better part also, maybe not a lot of studies like record that is people report having higher energy levels, like they can do so much more. Like for example, Adrian, like he's one of the client that I interviewed, and he would tell me all the time, like, he had so much energy. His wife would notice that, like, he's just like, on and on and on, like, and that is something that I think is empowering to see people have so much more energy and to see them being able to achieve more in life. Like, I think that's a big win, on a more individual level. And just being able to see, like, wow, like, I don't need to restrict carbs. My blood sugar is going down, like my A1C is going down, I'm feeling better. I think all of these things come together to improve the quality of life and also your mental health as well. So
Yeah.
that's what I would say in terms of the more individual level.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And, as you were saying that, as you were talking about, energy levels and Adrian, I think, there are, like you said, there are I've heard it so many times from, people who've gone through the program that, oh my gosh, my energy levels are so different. Like, I can't believe it. And I feel better rested and all of that. And I think it's really, really interesting. And one of the things that I studied a lot while at university was, the effects of chronic inflammation and inflammation in general. And that is so linked to what we eat and how we live our lives. And inflammation is really the enemy to our body and how we feel and how we function. And so I think that's something really interesting to look at, that a plant-based diet is an anti-inflammatory diet. And a lot of the problems that we experience on a day-to-day basis, like feeling low energy, low mood, joint pain, that is all linked to chronic inflammation. And I think in terms of quality of life, like the review also looked at how people experience pain and symptoms of neuropathy, and how that is something that is massively reduced in the the plant-based group throughout those different papers. So I think that's something that's really, really interesting to touch on as well. And, talking about quality of life, we kind of said that quality of life was only found to be improved in the plant-based group and not in the kind of comparative group or the control group. Linked to that is also the adherence, right? Because like we were saying, why would you want to continue with something that you feel is not improving your quality of life? So
yeah,
the review kind of found that 5 out of the 9 studies saw a statistically significant, a greater adherence that was statistically significant in the plant-based group. And so what it means to be statistically significant, you could have the plant-based group, reporting greater adherence, but it's only slightly greater than that of the comparative group. And so it has to exceed a certain amount to actually be significant. And so that's what we're looking at here. And they also measured the dietary restraint, so how restricted people actually felt. And that was higher in those comparative groups. So I think that's something really interesting to look at as well when you're considering adopting a kind of a lifestyle, or if you're just trying to educate yourself and find out more information. Because if you see that there is a relatively low rate of adherence on those, the conventional approaches like a ketogenic approach, or the what is termed as like the omnivore diet that a lot of the comparative models have, when you try to adopt a lifestyle change, you're putting a lot of your energy, your time, yourself into that. And if you're already seeing that it's repeatedly shown that the adherence is quite low, I think that's something really interesting to just be aware of. And yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's an individual's choice, but I think it's good to know that people really do struggle because they feel that level of restriction of, oh, I have to count my calories, I have to count my portions,
Yeah, and what do you think also contributes to that? Like with a low carb diet, what do you think contributes to low adherence other than, feeling restricted?
I think in terms of what I know, people I've spoken to, what I've read, we really are designed to run on carbohydrates. And so a lot of those conventional approaches that are being compared in this review to the plant-based diet, they require you to reduce the amount of carbs that you eat. And that's something that we refer to a lot, that carbohydrates, people view that as the very surface level problem, right? Carbs increase blood sugar, so don't eat carbs, right? But you're not really looking into why carbs are really drastically increasing blood sugar beyond the norm. Like even somebody who doesn't have insulin resistance or a form of diabetes, when they eat carbohydrates, they will have a small blood sugar spike. That's the natural way of things. That's how energy is released for you to use, How are you going to make use of that energy if it's not broken down into simple units that will raise your blood sugar? So I think it's really interesting to think about that, right? That we are really designed to run on that type of food, on carbohydrates, and that's something that gets so heavily restricted in these dietary patterns and in these diabetes diets, if you'd say.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I think a lot of people are influenced, and I see it in like movies and social media. Like a lot of people say like, oh, carbs is what makes you fat, or like, we don't eat carbs, like, because, it's going to make me fat. You just hear a lot in our popular culture, but the matter of fact is like, we need carbs. Like our brain burns 500 calories of glucose on average a day. That's a lot. And that's just our brain. Like imagine like our muscles, like our heart, like, we actually do need the glucose. And a lot of times what people also don't realize is with ketogenic diets or low carb diets, you're putting your body in a ketosis stage, and the ketosis is almost like the end game for your body. Your body is burning the fat really quickly because it thinks that it's not eating, like it doesn't have food, it's at its end stage. So it's definitely not the most optimal states that your body wants to be at. Ketosis is a protective mechanism that your body has. It's definitely not a state where you're meant to live on. And I think that's why a lot of times people have a strong craving of carbohydrates. And I can tell you, I've been on keto myself like a long time ago, and I would dream of having bread or like having like noodles, and I would wake up so guilty. Oh my gosh, I had that bread, like, but it was in my dream, which is ridiculous, but it changes something in you. It makes you crave carbohydrates, even if it's just fruits, and you crave that. You're like, dang, like it must be so nice to have a fruit, but I can't. Like, who wants to live like that? But it's just our bodies, both psychologically and physically, it drives you to carbohydrates because that's what it's designed to live on. And if this is getting more like archaeological or like biological, but if you look at any animals that's strictly carnivorous, their intestines are very straight, and they have like canine teeth, and like they're just designed to eat just animals, like cats, like tigers, like or even like lions, like they have a really like short intestine. But if you look at animals that thrive on a herbivorous diet, they actually have a really long intestine because it helps them like process all the fiber, and then they don't really have like canine teeth and things like that. And that, not saying that humans are like herbivores or whatever, but we do have a really long intestines. Like we are made to process a lot of the fiber. And so I think that's one of the things that people don't really realize, and they would rather just look at the short-term results that they're going to get, but just not to look at, okay, what's the most optimal diet for humans. And with the plant-based diet, Whole Foods plant-based diet is actually rated the highest when it comes to the diet quality index, and then low carb diets are rated the lowest because it's really low in the vital minerals and vitamins that you need. It's low in whole grains, that is really helpful. Soluble fiber is just, when you look at the diet quality index, a Whole Foods plant-based diet is definitely scoring the highest. So that's my rant, but
no,
that's my long-winded answer.
I love that. And I love that you've referenced, like the length of, the intestines. And that's something that is discussed in biology extensively when you study like biology further, or human anatomy. And like I also took I did I was confused about what I wanted to do. There was a hot moment where I was like, could I be a dentist? And so I took biology, right? And
Oh.
there's a huge conversation about, if we were really designed to eat meat, our, dentition would look completely different, right? The fact that our front teeth are meant to cut like soft, like plant material, and that we have so many molars that are meant to like really work the carbohydrates, right? And the fact that we produce salivary amylase, so the first enzyme that we produce, which is in the mouth in our saliva, breaks down carbohydrates. Like it's just constantly reinforced that is, that's the majority of what we should be eating. And I love what you referenced about, in pop culture, you really, I don't know where it comes from, but I remember growing up watching like Mean Girls, and like Regina George is like talking about how she's like on a low carb diet because she doesn't want to be fat. And the fact that you grow up watching this, and you don't really, when you're a kid and you're watching something like that, you're not questioning, oh, is it really carbohydrates? You just take it to be truth. And so many people are growing up with that idea. And I think it's fascinating because when people talk about carbs get generalized into this one thing of carbs are just, that one thing, not that carbs, there are different types of carbs, right? And that we have the carbs that we're speaking about, that we're referencing, those whole foods, like the whole grains, fruit and vegetables. And then you have those processed carbs like cake and, those packaged things that you find in the supermarket. And I think, they're really not equal. Like when we're talking about this, when we're speaking about, being plant-based and a plant-based diet being high in carbs, we're talking about the truly plant-based whole food carbohydrates. We're not referencing like pound cake and biscuits, and I don't know why I can't come up with more examples. You get me.
Too healthy.
But yeah, so I think that's it's really, really interesting. And we were speaking about adherence and dietary behaviors and stuff, and I think that what we've spoken about so far is a lot of it touches on, like we said, this review is interesting because it looks at both those physical measures like HbA1c, weight, blood panel work, so like looking at cholesterol and triglycerides, and it also looks at those other factors like the quality of life and adherence and depression scores. And so that's what we've touched on now, but this is more so to drive home the point of, on a plant-based diet, you're getting those benefits of improved quality of life, and you're still getting fantastic clinical endpoints, those outcomes that are being measured by your doctors, like A1C. So the review, like I said, it looks at 9 different studies. 8 out of the 9 had a statistically significant decrease in A1C in the plant-based group. So again, the 9th study did also have a decrease in A1C in the plant-based group, but it wasn't statistically significant. So it wasn't great enough. It wasn't so much larger than the comparative group. So that's awesome, right? And that's reinforced that we know this to be true because we see it on a daily basis. But really to drive home the point of, people in these studies, they are improving those clinical markers while also improving their quality of life. And that is huge. That is so big. And I'll say personally, as someone who's been through that process of like, before I moved to the UK, I think my A1C, and I'm type 1 diabetic, was like 12.7%. I really, really had a hard time. And then when I came here and I started to do more of my research and I switched up some things about the way that I approached my condition, my A1C came down to below 6. So it literally cut in half, which is a bit crazy when you think about that. And I can personally look back to where I was and I think about what my quality of life was. And I had the worst relationship with food. I just chose to like not eat because I was like, it's not even about carbs. Anything that I eat is going to be a problem. So I won't eat. I'll like run on coffee and water and tea. And that's absolutely awful. I don't know anybody who wants to be living their life like that. It's just, it comes from a place where you're so fed up of having to try and feel like you're failing that you end up giving up. So I think these kind of studies are fantastic because they point at a direction of being very, very hopeful, right? And you can see this tried and tested on so many people, not just like my personal experience, but other people that progress. These outcomes are being meticulously kind of monitored to be reported for our benefit, to really see, okay, this is something that works. mini rant over. Is there anything you want to comment on in relation to, the A1C outcomes from the review?
No, yeah, I that's not even a rant. That was very valuable. You offered a lot of just information as well. Yeah, I would say it's interesting that you pointed out, like, actually all of the studies did see an increase. It's just that the last study wasn't like statistically
Yeah.
significant, and that's something that I learned in my master program too. Is they do have a really high requirement.
Yeah.
Well, it depends, but like, they do have a higher requirement to be statistically significant. So the fact that actually 9 out of 9 studies did see a decrease in A1C, it's just that last one wasn't like as significantly, um, significantly different. Sorry, I'm like trying to find the right word. But I think that's super cool. And I feel like that just goes to show you don't have to cut carbs to decrease your A1C. You really want to find the root cause of problem. And I think that's what just is amazing about reversing insulin resistance is you're really reversing the mechanism that caused type 2 diabetes. And I think that's, one of the things that I always talk about is when you solve a problem, you want to solve the root cause of the problem, right? Like you don't want to just deal with the surface of it. It's kind of like cutting weeds, right? Like who cuts weeds? Like you're supposed to pull them out, right? Because if you cut it, like the next day it's going to grow out again. So that's what, these low carb approaches are. And to see that, all of these plant-based studies show that they have a significant decrease in the intervention group is definitely very exciting. And we definitely see it in the people that we work with as well. Sometimes we're even surprised, like, wow, like that really worked really well for you. Like it brought your A1C down by more than half, or it's just really exciting to find that out. About the physical part and just the fasting blood sugar. And I think this is one thing. This is another, just to kind of wrap it up, I feel like this studies really shows us that it's not just one thing that you're improving, right? And you shouldn't be just focused on your blood sugar. You should be focused about the whole health, right? If you're just focused about the blood sugar, it's easy to think, okay, I just need to cut out carbs to do that. But is that about your whole health? I think the whole point of this study was really not just your blood sugar, but your quality of life, like your A1C, I think it also mentioned about depression level. People's depression level drops. It's also about your emotional health. It's also about your neuropathy symptoms. It's about everything. And I think why me and Galia are so passionate about what we do and about this lifestyle is because it doesn't just help with one thing. It helps with everything. It helps with a lot of other areas in your life as well, with inflammation, with cholesterol, with lowering cancer risks. It helps with so many other things, and I think it's really just that's why we really want to get the word out there, because this method, this lifestyle definitely saves lives. So that's what I wanted to end on.
I love that. And, I totally agree. I love what you're saying on there are so many other things to look at beyond HbA1c. And unfortunately, a lot of the time in clinic, that's the one thing that gets, the biggest focus, right? And I understand, I get why it does, but it's really not everything. It's not the full picture, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a snapshot in time. And I've gone through phases, and I've seen other people go through phases where the HbA1c is, is in air quotes, if you can't see me, but healthy, right? The HbA1c normal, but the way that they feel, right, their emotional health, their mental health, their psychological well-being is suffering, right? So it's about what gets you to the best place overall, what gets the best health overall, what reduces your risk of complications, of further issues down the line. I won't give you the answer to that. It's up to you to make your mind up, right? As you learn more about what a plant-based diet kind of encompasses, what that means, you'll be able to make that decision for yourself. And I would never push it on someone. I think it's great to have that information so that you can make that decision yourself. And I think that's what we really wanted to do today, to share this information with you, because it's not something that gets spoken about very often, or it hasn't been spoken about, a lot until now. Things are kind of changing. We're at the start of a point in time where this is kind of growing into a movement. This is still early days, but it's really interesting to be a part of that. And, I would invite any of you, if you're interested to learn more, to join this kind of a movement, and to feel free to connect with us, to ask any questions. If you want to know more, if there's anything in particular that you would like to learn more about, if you want to know about how you can get started, feel free to reach out. Charmaine, where can people connect with you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Reversing on Plans, or on TikTok, same handle at Reversing on Plans as well. And what we prepared recently was a free training that goes through the science behind reversing diabetes and just the exact steps of how I help people reverse diabetes, because it's not just about eating the right things. So I go in depth about the different steps included in that as well. So if you want to check it out, I'll include the link in the show notes. And thank you so much for listening. Do you have anything else to add, Galia?
No, not necessarily. I feel like I've been talking forever, so I'll stop talking now.
No, we love it. We love it, Galia. And where can people find you, Galia?
You guys can connect with me on Instagram. So my handle is at type101 with Galia. And yeah, that's like the only platform I'm active on at the moment, but things might be changing. We'll see.
Amazing. Okay, cool. All right. So we will talk to you guys in next episode, and let us know what you guys would like to hear about as well. And we would love to answer questions or address other topics that you would like us to touch on. But thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Have a good one.